Hi, welcome to tonight's BPAC meeting. We are going to go around and do introductions. First, we are short on microphones, so everybody's going to get nice and cozy in each other's zones to do their introductions, and then we will do the equity and land acknowledgement. So as we're doing introductions, think about whether or not you want to be the person to do the equity and land acknowledgement. To start, I'm Mary Rose Fontana. I am the chair of BPAC, and I often participate on the community engagement meetings and the policy and planning meetings. We'll go with that.
Hi, I'm Nathan Lee. I'm the Duke Liaison position, and I am the chair of the Planning and Policy Subcommittee. I guess just
Hi, I'm Trevay Willis. I am the Public Transit Representative.
Let's see. Hello, everybody. My name is Christian Velasquez. I participate in the community engagement committee, and I've been on BPAC since August of 24.
Thank you. Hi, Scott Carter, and I've been on BPAC for 3 years and applying to renew another 3, hopefully. And I am the chair of the Development Review Committee.
Maggie Green. I am the Recreation and Urban Trails and Greenways and also our social media manager.
John Lawler. I am the represent the county as the seniority rep. I serve on the DevRev committee and the policy and planning committee, and I'm head of a task force on the UDO update.
My name is Rosie Edmonds. I'm the city youth representative, and I participate on the community engagement committee.
Thank you. Tony Reevy. I'm an at-large member from the county, and I serve on the planning and policy committee as well.
Hi, Hannah Salvaggio, bike and pedestrian planner and staff liaison.
Good evening. I'm Carl Rist. I'm the City Council Liaison. Good to see everybody.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ramsey Ritchie. I'm the Durham Open Space and Trails Liaison.
I turned it on. You can go ahead.
I'm Ed Rizzuto. I'm a county appointee, been on the commission since 2018, and I serve on the Community Engagement Committee as well.
Hi, I'm Hannah Bartlebaugh. I am the youth advocacy from the county slot, and I am the chair of the Community Engagement Committee.
I'm Chris Perlstein. I am the Transportation Planning and Policy slot for the city, and I'm also the secretary.
For ease of microphones, I'm nominating Christian to read the equity of land acknowledgement.
We, as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, want to begin this meeting by affirming BPAC's commitment to equity and racial justice. We would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on lands that have served as the home for diverse indigenous communities long before current governments were established here. We pay our respect to the elders and members of these communities, both past and present, and recognize the harms of genocide and colonialism. We will make a conscious effort to reflect on the following questions as we advance through our business and contemplate changes in our community. And we recognize that achieving equity requires our commitment to an ongoing process. How can we seek to repair harm with our work and not erase history? How does our work impact the vulnerability and safety of people who hold many intersecting marginalized identities, including Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, and lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning people? How can we prioritize and center people in our decision-making? How can we be more responsive to local needs? How can our work build community power and shared decision-making?
Thank you, Christian. Also, we have two excused absences. So Jeff is excused and Trent as well. We also received at 4 this afternoon that Royal is resigning. So I'm also taking that as not attending tonight. And then the only person so far who's not here is Landon, who did not request an excuse. Okay. Moving on to an update on new members and openings from Hannah.
Okay, so currently we have a couple vacancies. We have the city at large, and then we also have the county youth representative, and then there's a few members that have their applications that either they'll be reappointed or someone new will roll on. But the 2 vacancies right now, I believe we do have a decent number of applicants for the city at large position. The one position, though, that we're still struggling to find a person to fill is the youth representative. And so that one has been vacant for a while now. And so in the bylaws, we have where we are able to vote to make it an at-large position. And so there are applicants in the pool that could fill this position if it is voted to be at large instead of youth for this term. So yeah, wanted to kind of throw it out there if you all do want to vote to make it an at large, and then that would open it up to people.
This microphone situation is, oh, did I just mess it up? No, I didn't. It's kind of fun. So I don't actually remember, is Rosie a county or city? Do we want to think about whether we want to maybe leave the county slot as the dedicated youth representative because anybody in the city or the county could be in that spot? I mean, I don't know that we actually limit it by residents, do we?
No, it can be either.
Okay.
But just, yeah.
That was just my thought, is like, does it make sense to make the city one the more at large? I don't know.
Yeah.
But if there's no requirement, then it doesn't seem like it matters.
Yeah, it's just hard because it's like 15 to 24 age range, which we were able to get 13. So yeah, it's kind of hard to fill that one. And I don't know, Rosie, if like you have a ton of classmates that want to be on the commission, but we haven't received any applicants, so.
Just want to acknowledge that Rosie has set the bar so high, Rosie, that it's probably hard to fill that because you've been such a success with your design skills. So thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know what we've done to possibly like reach out to maybe local high schools or something like that to make it more, give more awareness that this exists. That, I don't know if that's an opportunity to fill it or if it's just worth converting to at-large and calling it a day. But I wanted to also throw that out there. I don't know how we communicate this other than having it on the website. So, if you're not really passionate about it and trying to do it and wanting to do this, you may not hear about it. And that may be why we kind of have some of that struggle. Whereas, if we kind of work with the schools to announce this somehow, advertise it, maybe we get more applicants possibly.
Yeah, I will say before Rosie was on and we had 2 vacancies, I did work quite a bit with the Office of Youth. And yeah, they were able to help a bit with social media, but it is a big effort. So if it is something that the commission is interested about and you're able to kind of spearhead this, definitely willing to kind of wait another month or so. So yeah, open to y'all, whatever you all want to do.
How does everybody else feel about it? I mean, I think the plus side of converting it to an at-large position is that youth can still apply for it. So it's not limiting their ability. It's just allowing other people who might be interested to step in.
And I will say, Mary Rose, ooh, that's loud. Since we vote on all those applications, I think if you had sort of like a younger person in competition with sort of someone who's more mature, kind of has sort of experience and stuff, it might be harder for that youth person to get elected. That's the only reason why it might make sense to keep it. And that's one reason to keep it reserved for youth. So.
Yeah, I don't think that they look. So if someone doesn't apply to the youth position, I don't know that they look specifically at birthdays to see if like someone that is 24 applied to another position, if they can be appointed for that. But I don't think we have any young people right now in the pool on the county side. There's a thought.
And this has also been a difficult position to fill in the past. So it's been, questionable whether it should be switched to at-large previously, because it's just difficult to fill and also difficult to keep youth in that position. So do I have yeah.
I'd like to move that we convert the youth position to an at-large position.
Chris seconded. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we reclassify the county youth position to an at-large position. All those in favor, raise your hand. Those opposed? All right, it passed unanimously that we will reclassify the youth position to an at-large position. I will also mention that Royal's position is for NCCU. So if you know anybody there who wants to fill the NCCU liaison position, tell them that it'll show up at some point in the near future. They either have to work or attend school at NCCU. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next item. So are there any adjustments to the agenda? Not seeing any. Great. And then our next item is approval for the minutes for April and May. We'll do those separately. Can I get a motion to approve the April minutes? Okay, Tony has moved to approve the April minutes. Can I get a second? John has seconded. All those in favor of approving April's minutes? Those opposed? Great. Can I get a motion for May's minutes?
Motion we approve May's minutes.
Nathan motion to move. Motion to approve May's minutes. Second. Christian seconded. Great. All those in favor? Those opposed? Great. Okay, so now we will move on to our public comment period. There's a few people who showed up to provide public comment. If you could approach the podium and we'll just, if you guys just want to make a line or something. You have 3 minutes and state your first and last name, and then you may provide your comment.
Thank you very much. My name is Tony Nicholson, and I'm here with my partners, Rachel Hardy and Bob Crum. We are here on behalf of Durham Can, which many of you probably are familiar with the organization. It's a community organizing organization here in Durham, and it's made up of member institutions such as churches, synagogues, other religious groups, and neighborhood organizations or other associations. And we advocate on various social justice or quality of life issues for what is important to the people in our institutions. And we arrived at those things through listening sessions, and which we've had fairly recently. One of the things that bubbled up in our listening sessions was a concern about safety around schools and sidewalks and infrastructure and transportation and kids getting to and from school. And so we are doing research at this point about this issue to see if there's something there that we can advocate, something specific we can advocate on to make improvements in this area. And so we're really just in the research phase, and I'm here just to make you aware that we are just doing research, and we'd love to speak with several of you about your thoughts on this issue to educate us so that we can determine if this is something that we really can advocate for. And we have already had a couple of meetings with your folks in your group, but we'd like to have more. And so we just wanted to make you aware of that and appreciate all your efforts. And we'll look forward to working with you as we conduct our research. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Chris, go ahead.
I was curious if you guys could provide any information on the best way to contact you all, either, as BPAC representatives or just concerned citizens.
Yes, what I could do is I could just email Hannah or whoever, whatever's the easiest way, contact information for the leadership in our little subcommittee. And then, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'd be happy to talk to you.
Great, thank you. Yes, Wendy. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Durham Can is a very effective advocacy organization in Durham, and they have been responsible for many important policy changes in Durham. For instance, last year they advocated for moving forward with the CEF program, which is the Universal Breakfast and Lunch, which ended up being adopted by the Board of Education. And also they are really the group that led the pushed the county to get involved in affordable housing, and their efforts led to the 300 and 500 East Main Street projects. They pushed the city and the Durham Housing Authority to move forward on Fayette Place. So in other words, I would highly recommend that BPAC work with Durham Can. They're also great people and a lot of people, but there's like 300 members or something like that. Is that right? 530 different groups. So they would be a great partner.
Great, thank you guys. And somebody else had emailed us earlier this week about public speaking. Is anybody else here? Not seeing any? Okay. Then we will go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is our guest presentation from Becca. Becca is the NCDOT Division 5 Highway Engineer, and you can come up here. Oh, we've got a fancy mic. So Becca's provided a few presentation slides, but this is going to be more of a conversation because we've already, within the past 2 years, had a NCDOT presentation. So, but I told her she could make a few slides if she needed. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. I don't know. I know Hannah was worried about the stream, but I'll stand right here if that's okay, so I can see all of you. But Hannah, let me know if we need to do something different. And do you just want me to tell you when to advance the slides, or do you have a clicker? All right, next slide. All right, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you all for the invitation. Thank you, Carl and Wendy, for arranging this. I know we've had a wonderful couple of meetings with the city and the county to talk about how do we continue to build a better relationship between the different entities, and look forward to talking to you a little bit about my vision, some of the things that we've talked about. And then really want to spend a lot of time just listening and talking with you all about feedback on things that have worked well, not worked well, and how we all can continue to do better and create better partnerships and better collaboration between the city and NCDOT as well. I'm going to cover really briefly a high level of Division 5 and DOT. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself too, to articulate kind of where I come from and what my why is and why I show up to work every day and why I care about transportation. And then open the floor to you all for open discussion, questions, dialogue around how we can continue to do business in a meaningful way to create effective change and good transportation infrastructure for our communities here in the Durham County and Durham City area. Next slide. So NCDOT and North Carolina is home to a really robust and incredible transportation system. As you can see, NCDOT does everything from ferries, bike ped, transit, one of the fastest growing rail systems in North Carolina. There's a lot to be proud about, but also when you start to think about bike and ped and what it takes to get things done in North Carolina, it takes a lot of people. It takes partnership with the cities, counties, municipalities, and then within DOT, it's not just one person, right? And that's one of the questions I think someone raised in advance, like who do you talk to, right? When you look at this picture, we have Integrated Mobility Division, which does bike, ped, and transit. You have the highway divisions, you have central divisions. So I know one of the things that I wanted to talk with you all about as well is how do you know who to talk to, and how do you know the right person at DOT to talk to? Because DOT can seem like a really intimidating organization to talk to when you have questions or need to advocate for projects or for change. So I want to make sure that to share with you all some of the different components of DOT. So hopefully we can dispel some of the confusion and also create some change around how do we really create that one DOT response and accurate and quality information for you all when you have questions. Next slide. Just for your information, DOT in the highway division side is split up into 14 different divisions, from 1 all the way in the northeast of North Carolina to 14, which is the westernmost part of North Carolina. We're here in Division 5, as you all are aware, which covers the 7 counties around the Greater Triangle region. What is interesting about this map is that every single division is unique. Every single division has very different transportation issues. Division 1, as you've seen in recent News and Observer articles, has some incredible shoaling and interesting coastal issues, whereas Divisions 11, 13, and 14 are grappling with the long effects of Hurricane Helene and how to rebuild from that. So the needs of Division 5 are a lot different from the needs of Division 1 and Division 14. And so trying to create and address those as an organization can be challenging, but certainly a challenge that is worth taking and important to take as well. When we compare ourselves to other divisions, a lot of times we compare ourselves to 10, which is the Mecklenburg area, and 7, which is the Greensboro area. What I will share that's different and interesting about 5 versus 10 is that 10, Mecklenburg County, largely the only municipality in Mecklenburg County is the city of Charlotte. Here in Division 5, we have Wake and Durham counties. So Durham County has only the city of Durham as well as another municipality, but in Wake County, we have 12 municipalities. So there's a lot of complexity in terms of doing business, a lot of complexity in terms of just workload with so many different stakeholders in our region, and something that we're working to address through strategic staffing. Next page. So this is a snapshot of Division 5. So here in Division 5, we cover everything from, I think, Fuquay is our southernmost municipality all the way to the Virginia line. So the challenges that we face here in the urban areas with Durham and Wake counties are very, very different from areas like Warren County, where there's no grocery store in the entire county. So what transportation means to you all is very different from what transportation means to Warren County. So as a division and as a department, it is important for us to be responsive to unique community needs and listening to you all on what you envision your transportation infrastructure to look like. The other thing that is up on the screen is our number of road miles. So here in Division 5, we have about 6,700 road miles, which is the largest division of the 14 divisions. We have about 500 state employees, 7 maintenance yards. So every single one of our counties has a maintenance yard, with the exception of Wake, which has 3 now, and one of them is shared with Franklin. So if you have anything like a pavement issue, drainage issues, anything like that, you would be calling our maintenance yard. We have 5 construction offices. So those are the people who manage everything from pavement resurfacing contracts all the way up to our big projects like I-440, a lot of the rail grade separation projects that we're currently seeing. And then lastly, we also have our district offices, which is where a lot of the work that we're going to talk about today lies. So our district offices, the closest one is District 2, which is located just up the road on Duke Street. So District 2 covers Person, Granville, and Durham County. So more to talk about that in just a minute. Next slide. So I just wanted to put this up here so you kind of understand the scope of what it takes to do business and what the life cycle of transportation infrastructure is from the department side. So it really starts with good plans, and I want to commend you all and the city of Durham and the county for your recent adoption of the Vision Zero and High Injury Network, which is a really great foundation for how we think about safety and how we think about transportation plans in the future. What's great about that is when we think about safety, I know Carl and Wendy get a lot of these, but we get a lot of calls about safety issues along our network. And what's incredible about these long-range plans is it looks at all the issues equitably. So it's not just about who knows who to call, but how do we actually look at it systematically and how do we identify trends and patterns in a meaningful and data-driven way. So it's a really incredible document and look forward to working with you all on that as well. After we work through and work with you all in the Triangle West Transportation Planning Organization to develop those long-range plans, then those plans are turned into our process through what are our different funding programs to create funded projects. So the biggest one is our STIP or STIP program, which is the State Transportation Improvement Program. One of the interesting things about that program that many of you might be aware is that it does not fund standalone bike ped projects, which has been an issue and a challenge for delivering some of these critical bike ped projects in this region. There are other programs, including spot safety and other smaller programs, which can be a support in funding some of these standalone bike ped projects that are needed in these communities. After a project has funding, we enter what's called project development. So that's when we have engineers doing designs and we have if we need to acquire right-of-way, we're purchasing those properties. If we need to move any utilities, we're working with our utility providers to move those utilities out of the right-of-way. Then we let the project to construction, build the project, and then we enter my favorite phase, which is maintenance and operations. So after you cut the ribbon and you open it to traffic or you open it to pedestrians or bicyclists, that's where we enter the managing the facility and figuring out at what point do you need to replace this facility, at what point is the facility no longer safe due to crash patterns and different things along that corridor. And eventually that data then comes back into your long-range plan. So it really is a cycle across your corridor and across your transportation network. I didn't put this on here, and I was thinking, man, I should have put it on there. But really what goes at the center here is our community. And this is something where I think historically there's been a feeling of disconnect, is where does the community fit in this? And so this is a big focus for myself, and I hope that you share this priority, is making sure that we are always leading with our community at the center of all this process. Next slide. All right, so I put this org chart up here, similar to the first slide. It's a lot, and I don't expect you to squint, but there are a lot of different offices in Division 5. I'm going to highlight just a couple in here, but wanted to show you the whole breadth of the different offices and the different resources. So at the top is myself as division engineer. We have 3 main groups within the division. The first is the division project development group. So this is the group that is actually doing the design, utility coordination, and working with right-of-way to acquire parcels along different projects. So if a project is, for instance, STIP funded, a lot of times it is managed through our project development group. For locally administered projects, these are also managed through a local administered project manager, which is located in this group. So in many cases, this is often where our city staff are working with NCDOT to deliver those projects. Our next group is our construction group, which are our different resident engineers who are actually delivering our big construction projects. Then we have our maintenance group. What is interesting about maintenance is our district engineers actually fall under maintenance in our current organizational chart. So things like development issues, things like working with cities on encroachments and different agreements often falls under maintenance, which is kind of an interesting place to put it for such an important office, and something that we're looking at what the future of that location is for that office as well. And then under maintenance, we do everything from patching potholes. We have staff who patch potholes. We have staff who pick up litter and mow mow the side of roads. We also have staff who maintain our bridges, who maintain our tandem dump trucks. So we have a lot of the 520 staff that I shared with you, a lot of them fall under this maintenance shop. So we have a lot of staff out there who are doing that important work, like IMAP drivers who might assist you if you run out of gas or have a flat tire in the interstate as well. So a lot of important work happens here in the maintenance area. And a lot of your questions may be related to maintenance as well. Next slide. All right, so you're probably wondering why I have a picture of my parents on the screen. So these are my parents. My parents are both 70 years old. They just turned 70 this year. I'm from Delaware originally. They still live there. On the weekends, they like to take SEPTA into Philadelphia. That's their transit system. They love biking on the Jack Markell Trail, which is a greenway in Delaware. And they are my average citizen. So a lot of times when I'm asking my parents a question, or if I'm trying to figure out how do I communicate something to the public, I call up my mom and I ask her and I tell her and I explain to her, and she'll be like, that doesn't make sense. Or we talk about it a lot. And this is something that I've encouraged my staff to do too, is identify who in their personal life is their average member of the public, right? Because a lot of times, and a lot of the things that we see is a lot of frustration because we as engineers aren't communicating effectively the concepts, or we're not understanding or empathizing with what we're actually designing. So trying to encourage staff to make a connection between the work that we do every day and the people that we impact every day is really important. So I put my parents up on the slide because they are my average member of the public. And this picture was taken in Shenandoah National Park. My mom hiked it in a boot, which is incredible. She's my hero. Next slide. So I told you I was from Delaware. This is just a fun little stat, but when I told my mom, hey mom, I'm the new Division 5 division engineer, a person who doesn't know anything about DOT doesn't understand what that means, right? Division 5 doesn't mean anything to a member of the public. So I was trying to contextualize for her, what do we actually do here in this region? What does the triangle mean? What does transportation infrastructure mean? And how do we deliver all that? So I compared it to Delaware for her. So you look at the two areas where you have about 900 square miles more just area than Delaware. Next slide. And when you start to look at the state highway agency owned roads, we actually have 6,700 versus their 5,400. And keep in mind, I put there at the bottom the number of employees they have. They have 1,600 employees to manage the roads in Delaware. So less roads, more employees. Next slide. And then that got me thinking, if Delaware is smaller than Division 5, how many other states are smaller than Division 5? And it turns out there are 14 states with fewer road miles than NCDOT Division 5. When I think about that number, I think about a couple things. One, I think about that's a reflection of the growth here in the triangle. That's a reflection of the number of people here in the triangle. That is a challenge, right? Each one of my staff members, each one of the city staff members is responsible for a lot and has to be responsive to a lot as well. So that's challenging, but it also fills me with pride too when I see all the incredible work that can be done if we build that effective collaboration model, if we build an effective transportation system, and if we figure out how do we move forward and address challenges as they come. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me. Next slide. So a little bit about me. I don't look like most division engineers. Most division engineers spend 25 years in a division before they become division engineers and they work their way up. I have never worked in division until 6 months ago. I started my career in the maintenance side of the house in state maintenance in Raleigh. The picture on the left is actually a picture of me in 2013 sweeping Capitol Boulevard. And that's a picture I show every single one of our interns, and I show every single one of our new hires, because it's important to be humble and it's important to understand what it takes to do the job. Sweeping Capitol Boulevard is something our staff have to do things like that every single day. And so you have to be willing to put on a vest, put on your steel-toed boots and get out there and get it done. So I started my career here at DOT in the maintenance side of the house. I'm actually from Delaware. I went to school up north in Boston, and I now live in downtown Raleigh. So I have a 4-year-old, I have a wonderful husband. When I get home on Friday afternoon, I actually usually don't get in the car again until Monday morning. That is something that I am very proud of, that is important to my quality of life, is that I love walking to morning times in downtown Raleigh every Saturday morning. and taking my son to the Science Museum downtown. So when you look at me compared to other division engineers, I'm very different, have a very different perspective and a very different background. But I think that is relevant to this job, right? Because part of getting this job done and doing it well is being able to empathize and walk in the shoes of many of our communities and citizens. My most recent role before Division 5, I was the director of NCDOT's Division of Aviation. So in the Division of Aviation, hey, aviation person over there we go. There are 72 public use airports in North Carolina. What is interesting about NCDOT's relationship with our 72 public use airports is, with the exception of one of them, we don't own a single airport. So one of my roles as the director of the Division of Aviation was working with communities to provide them grant funding to achieve their visions. So I acutely understand that it's so critically important to understand what a community's vision is when it comes to transportation infrastructure, because it's about empowering people, it's about listening, it's about collaborating, right? So that is something that I learned very intimately at Division of Aviation. The last thing that I'm very passionate about that I'll talk about in a second is people. So on the right is my 5 interns from last summer that I love them all. What's interesting is the one second from the left, what's cool about him is he is the great-grandson of a Tuskegee Airman. And we were able to get him an internship in the Division of Aviation. Now he is on a full-time career path to a job in the aviation sector. So I also believe part of our role here in the department is creating opportunity, economic opportunity, job opportunity, showing what is powerful and what is possible through transportation, and all the different opportunities that can come through good transportation infrastructure. Next slide. So that feeds into what are my focus areas. Number one, I think we're at DOT, you're required to put safety, but I will tell you my why on safety, because I don't want it to seem like I just stuck safety on because I'm supposed to, right? So for me, when I talk about safety with my staff, I always put up a picture of my 4-year-old son. A couple months ago, we were doing zip lining, and he was wearing a harness, and he had his little line with his little carabiner on the thing, and he was about to jump off the zip line. And the reason why I put it up there is that it was about expectations. I talked to my staff about what's your expectation when you show up to work every day. And your expectation when you show up to work every day is that you get to the weekend, that you get to your holiday, that you get to your son's birthday, right? And our traveling public has that same expectation. When they go for a walk, when they go for a run, go for a bike ride, they have the expectation that they're going to get home that day, then they're going to get to the next significant milestone. So for me, safety really is the core of what we do, because that is the expectation we set for ourselves and that the general public sets. So something that I have been working to share with our staff too is the importance of leading with safety and leading with empathy and understanding what is your why from a safety perspective. It's not just a word, but there are people and stories behind safety. And so making sure that we understand the stories, which is part of the reason why I'm here and part of the reason why I've gotten involved with things like the Bike Durham Coalition, is because it's so important to hear stories and participate and understand the why for people and safety. The middle one is continuous improvement and change management. So this came from Division of Aviation. In the Division of Aviation, one of the things when I started there I noticed was that we had a lot of friction points. We had a lot of challenges. I constantly heard that we can't do this because it's the way we've always done it. We got a lot of no's and we didn't get a lot of whys. So continuous improvement comes from that time. We actually started what's called a continuous improvement committee, where we brought all the airports together, we brought all the stakeholders together, and we inventoried pain points in the process. Because a lot of times there are just issues with process, and if you don't address them head on and you don't identify the issues, it just continues to fester and fester, and you don't deliver quality projects and you don't efficiently deliver projects either. So continuous improvement is something that I look forward to bringing to this role and to bringing to you all and working with you all on, is how do we actually identify some of those process challenges? If we have to tell you no, why are we telling you no? That's something that I'm working with my staff now, is how do we communicate whys? Sometimes the why is legislative, right? We can't change that. Or you all can advocate for change. And sometimes the why is policy. And we can talk about what the policy reasons are. And sometimes it's more of a judgment or an engineering thing, and we need to talk through that and figure out how do we help you and how do we help our staff overcome some of those challenges. So being able to identify pain points and then also figuring out where can we create solutions, and where do we have roadblocks that might be more legislative or challenging as well. So that's one of the things that I look forward to working with you all on. How do we continue to improve? How do we identify those pain points? And how do we move forward in a meaningful and productive way? And lastly, it's about people. So this goes back to my interns. This goes back to me loving to walk every weekend. One of my big focuses is centering what we do on our people, whether it be my staff or the members of our public. How do we recruit and retain high quality people that are reflective of our communities? How do we listen to people through good customer service as well? So people envelops a lot of different things, but I think a lot of what we do has to start from people. So with that, I'm going to open the floor. That was a lot, but open the floor to questions, comments, discussion points. Here to listen. I might not know all the answers today because, as I told you, I've been in a division for 6 months now. So I might have to take some notes and get back to you, but look forward to some dialogue with you all on some of the challenges you're having or how we can work together.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm so clumsy. So majority of the airports, because I'm a pilot as well.
Oh, good.
But are they governed by DOT?
So
because it's FAA.
Yeah, good question. So interestingly, North Carolina is what's called a block grant state. So the FAA delegates NCDOT authority to act as the FAA in North Carolina for a lot of airport infrastructure matters. So we do a lot of the engineering review, planning review, permitting, all those sorts of things run through NCDOT instead of the FAA.
Gotcha.
Yep. I wish I owned one. Oh, GTP, Global Trans Park. Yeah, in Kinston, yes, which is an incredible airport. It's the longest public runway in North Carolina. They have some interesting tenants, we'll call it. And they're one of the airports that most frequently sees the Antonov, which is one of the largest airplanes in the world. So it's a very interesting airport if you ever get the chance to go down there.
I'm Chris Perlstein, in case you missed the introduction. I just want to say I've heard a lot of good things about you, and so I'm happy that you're here in this role, and I think it's going to be a positive change. I hope it's going to be a positive change. I also really appreciate that you showed up for the right of silence and made some comments there. I think that's a big change in tone. One thing that I think is interesting is, and obviously can't get into too much detail in an overview presentation, is to talk about safety and what that means from an engineering perspective, both historically and today. I actually recently finished reading Killed by a Traffic Engineer, which is an excellent book. I don't know if you have.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I think it should be required reading for anybody working for NCDOT or any other state Department of Transportation. But I live on Roxborough Street. My address is literally on that. And it's kind of interesting. We pushed for making the street safer as part of the recent repaving. And I think, from the beginning, it was a frustrating dynamic where we're having to advocate for making the street safer instead of NCDOT stepping up and saying, this is our street, we need to make this safer, even in simple, basic ways by like repainting the lanes differently, right? But on top of that, we've experienced houses crashed into, there's been deaths on this street, and it's a 35-mile-per-hour street. There's been a lot of media coverage about incidents that my neighbors have recorded where people are purposefully or accidentally almost run down in crosswalks, crossing in an urban area. And one of the things that I think about is like, when we made this initial request, the district engineer actually had a comment in there after expressing a lot of skepticism about wanting to change the street, and said literally the phrase greater responsibility. And I think that that's kind of an interesting thing in terms of like, well, is he only thinking about safety from the perspective of cars being able to move quickly and cars being able to move comfortably? So what kinds of things are you looking at changing in terms of the perspective of safety or the users who use that? My neighborhood also has 42% of households do not own a car, which is obviously very different than the more suburban or rural context. So what are you doing to kind of change the culture there for NCDOT and make them think about really that greater responsibility to other transportation users other than those in a car?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot there, and I'm trying to figure out where to start. But I mean, that is a very important question, and actually the question I thought I would get today, right? So a couple things to think about. Number one of the things that stands out to me about Roxborough and Mangum is that they were originally designated a U.S. business route. And one of the things that we have heard consistently from communities is that it's not that, right? And that sort of goes back to the greater responsibility thing. So one is a reflection on how do we change the definition of a facility when it is appropriate and when is that time? And so that's something we're working on with our state traffic engineer, is developing a policy around conversion of one-way pairs to two-way streets, so that it is very clear what the milestones are and where so I think one of the things that we have run into on this project is the perception that we continue to move the bar. And so creating a process that very clearly articulates that and how we define those facilities. So specific to that, that's one of the things that we're doing moving forward to allow more projects like that, because we're hearing a big interest in those sort of facilities. And we know we have 2 others in Durham alone where you all are looking at that two-way conversion. So making sure that we provide clear expectations at the beginning on what that process looks like so that the city and the county can be successful. So that's number one. From a more broader kind of what you're talking about with safety, how do we integrate it into the DOT culture? A lot of what have been starting to encourage my staff to do, and look forward to doing some more programming this year, is actually getting them out of the office to do things like one of the first people Carl actually had me walk Knox Street with him. Like, I think it was the second month in the office. And that was one of the most meaningful experiences, because we actually ran into an individual who was involved in a car accident on that facility. That was a powerful moment, but a moment that you don't get if you're sitting in the office. So from a culture perspective, there's a lot to do in terms of getting our staff out there, getting them to actually understand the feeling of what it feels like to bike by active traffic, right? There's nothing like that feeling when you're walking, biking, when you're with a stroller with your kid, right, next to traffic. What does that feel like? So there's some culture work to be done there, but then also some process work, which is how do we support communities in the process of making some of these changes, whether it be reclassification of that facility into a different type, whether it be what a conversion looks like. You mentioned resurfacing. Resurfacing is one of those really incredible programs where if we use it effectively, we can create a lot of change, because to your point, it stripes, right? So I think that is a low-hanging fruit, is working with the city to figure out how do we leverage the resurfacing program to deliver our maintenance needs and your bike and ped needs. So certainly look forward to talking with you all more on that, because that is, to your point, a really great program to do that work if we collaborate at the beginning to figure out what that vision is for that facility.
I can just add on that real quick. So that was the block on Gregson where that school bus had that crash into somebody's backyard, but the crash, like, it ended up in a backyard, but it literally went almost like a whole block, and you could see like the ruts in front of several homes where the bus was careening, almost tipping over and then ending up in the backyard. So walking that was just eye-opening. So thank you.
Absolutely. So if there's other situations like that, I think would love to participate in those as well. Yes, sir.
Hi, Tony Reevy. Different area, but one that could impact the city and the county and the state, and that is, and I work for a major university, so I'm worried about this all the time, but we're seeing a major step function change in funding for many public programs. And historically, a number of transportation programs have been federally funded or received federal funding, including transit, rail, and so on. I mean, are we starting to see any impacts of decline in federal funding in the transportation sector?
That's a good question, and it's a complex question. So because there's, I would say from a programmatic perspective and a funding perspective, there are a lot of different factors going on right now. I'm probably going to make you really sad, but in the past 3 years, when you look at the National Highway Cost Construction Index, it's increased 67%. So which is significantly outpaced the Consumer Price Index. So we have incredible inflation happening on all of our projects. We have Helene, which is a $5 billion price tag for the department. Right now, we're looking at 80% being covered by the federal government, but the department's still having $1 billion. So we have to find $1 billion somewhere. And then certainly the things that you're talking about, uncertainty at the federal level. So the value of the dollar is less and less every day. And the challenges of delivering the program of projects we have is more and more. So I would say all of those things are incredibly challenging. When you look at our STI, our STIP program, we got no new projects at the division level this year. In fact, we lost projects. So certainly we're seeing that trend where we're having to have harder and harder conversations with municipalities and communities because we just don't have the funding, because the cost to deliver projects has gone up while there's also more taxes and more burdens on those funding sources. So it's definitely a challenge. So I would say it's going to continue to be a challenge. Certainly, we're nervous about inflation, what that's going to look like over the next several years. So something that we're continuing to monitor and see where that leads us. Yep. Yes, sir.
One area that's kind of sensitive right now in Durham County is the safety for kids walking to school. And there are really two pressure points there. One is the DPS policy change, where due to a situation where they're short on bus drivers, they're forced to ask the kids to walk if they live within a certain range of the school. And that's putting a lot of pressure on the infrastructure that wasn't designed for that because these kids have been bused for a long time. And so we've got a real clear example of that at Hope Valley, which you may be familiar with. It's become the infamous Hope Valley situation. And then the other is one caused by just the growth, because there's so much growth going on in Durham County that schools that were basically on rural roads, now all those rural roads are being developed. And before there were no sidewalks, there wasn't high density, and now all of a sudden we've got high density residential going in some cases across the street from a school with no way for the kids to get across a road that's 35 or 45 miles an hour. We had another situation where we have a new development that's going in adjacent to Neal Middle School. And the challenge on that one is there's no way to put a sidewalk from the development along the highway over because there are two properties in between. And yet this is high density. How do we get the kids over? And so one of the things we're looking at is updating some of the UDO spec that says we're looking to require developers. If you're bringing that density, you're creating the problem, therefore you're responsible for a solution. Where does NCDOT fit in? Because most of these are NCDOT roads. In the case of Hope Valley, 3 of the 4 intersections of those are NCDOT. And so who do we work with? How do we work on figuring out new ways to get an improvement to that infrastructure? Hope Valley, it's 130 elementary age kids that are affected, okay, once they start walking, okay? With some of these other schools, you've got 260 apartments. Don't know how many kids projected in that, but it's going to be a lot, okay? They just need to get across the street. What is the process within NCDOT? Who do we talk to start looking at getting some improvement to that infrastructure? Because there's an intersection there in one case, but there's no way the question is, how do we add crosswalks? How do we add push-to-walk light systems on a intersection that wasn't designed for it?
Yeah, so two answers to that, because there's 2 different issues that I heard you just say. So number one is DOT does have a schools group that can help review some of these case situations. MSTA, happy to connect you with them. So it's a very niche group that does that sort of work, looking at schools. They look at both new expanding, but they can also look at existing schools too, to see what sort of improvements, make recommendations and support in that discussion. So certainly that would be a really good group to link up with. But when it comes to actually some of those developer things and actually making the decisions on development, that goes back to the district office. So anytime a development above a certain number of trips happens, they work with our district office to do something called a traffic impact analysis. And in that traffic impact analysis, it looks at things like turn lanes, pedestrian infrastructure, all sorts of different needs to determine what the developer may have to provide or pay for. So that's where we intersect a lot, is during that. So certainly something that maybe we could work with you all to look at that process, because I don't know that it goes into the depth on bike ped infrastructure that you're looking for, but certainly something that we could talk about and educate you on what our process is and look and see if there's opportunity to collaborate better on that process as well. Yes, sir.
So what's DOT's practice or a strategy for multi-use paths now? Like we've been involved in Highway 98, that we reviewed some plans, and I think they were state plans about adding a multi-use path along there. I'm just trying to figure out, between bike lanes and traditional sidewalks and multi-use paths, how do they all fit together, and what is the strategy for using any or all of those?
That's a good question. So when we, I think someone mentioned complete streets at one point. So when our designers scope a project, what they'll look at is the bike and pedestrian plans for that community. They work with the Integrated Mobility Division as well, who provide recommendations. I will say, I think the most common typical section that we're seeing right now on a lot of these urban areas is a sidewalk on one side and a multi-use path on the other. I think that's something that the department is consistently seeing before it becomes a betterment. So that's something that we're seeing on a lot of projects is one side MUP, other side sidewalk. Correct. Yep. So we're seeing that a lot. So it really does, that goes back to the importance of planning. Our policy requires us to look at those plans. So it's important that those plans are up to date and provide a full picture into what the municipality and the communities are looking at. So that's very important. I know we mentioned growth, right? It's hard to keep pace with growth with those plans, but that's where we really go to and where we look first when the Integrated Mobility Division makes those recommendations. But certainly we do see a lot of challenges when it comes to things like betterments when you're trying to go beyond what some of our minimum recommendations are. So that's maybe where we start to run into friction is how do we work with the city on if they need a cost share on some of those betterments, or how do we actually determine what is a betterment? So certainly if there's other questions on that, would be happy to talk about it some more. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Wow, that's so loud. I am the liaison for Durham Open Space and Trails in an area where we share a lot of interest as seeing trails as critical infrastructure for transportation in the community. One of the challenges that we see is just lots of delays in that process, which is consistent across a lot of other cities as well. But I'm wondering if you see any areas and where you see areas of improvement for the city, the county, and DOT to work more effectively to build out efficiencies and make sure that we can decrease project timelines a little bit for those projects.
It's a good question. So thinking off the cuff, my first reaction was one piece of feedback I hear a lot is we wish you had told us sooner. Like I hear that a lot, like the city or municipality will get to 25% plans and then feel like the perception of moving the bar. So I think the core of all project is a really good scope. And this is something I've talked to Carl and Wendy about, particularly when we talk about cost increases on a project. It is very easy to put something in at the beginning, and it's very hard to justify adding it in midway through a project. DOT, because of the 2019 financial crisis we went into, we have to justify everything anytime we increase the budget on a project and increase it to the individual line item and individual unit cost of it. So it is very important. The scoping of a project is so incredibly important going forward. Something that the department is also working on a different process on is how do we make sure we have a really good project before we start work? How do we make sure it's reflective of bike ped? A lot of times historically got left off. How do we make sure that's included? And how do we make sure then as a project moves forward that we're managing the scope and budget in a way that creates a quality project and not just another project? Does that answer your question? Yes, sir.
Just following up on, I guess, John's comments earlier, and maybe I'm looking for just a general philosophical sort of, what's your take on why a situation is allowed to exist where you have a school across the street from a neighborhood, there's an intersection there, yet there's no crosswalks, there's no infrastructure. You began the talk by emphasizing the importance of safety. Why is it that a situation like that is allowed to exist?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say there's, our system is evolving, and in a lot of cases, we have a system that was developed, implemented 20, 30, 40 years ago when things were different, right? And we have not kept pace with things like pedestrian infrastructure. My favorite example of that is ADA curb ramps. When I started with the department, one of the first things we actually had to do here in Durham too, is survey every single ADA curb ramp in the entire state and here in Durham County. And now we're still working through the implementation plan of upgrading those, right? So if we had even though we know that a crosswalk may be needed, it takes knowing that it's there. And then it takes funding and all the other different components to do that. So it is not a, flip the switch and our infrastructure will be what we want it to be. It's a process, right? And we have a lot of infrastructure here in North Carolina, and a lot of infrastructure here in Division 5. So it takes advocacy, it takes collaboration, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of prioritization and funding to do all those different components as well. So it's certainly something that we hope to continue to do better on, hope to continue to address those, using things like the high injury network to identify those locations so that we can do it in a data-driven and equitable manner as well. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Vision Zero plan earlier. A lot of the high injury streets in that are NCDOT streets.
Yep.
And so it's my impression of NCDOT in the past is that they don't care how many people die as long as level of service stays the same or improves. So in order for them to actually do Vision Zero, they're going to have to be willing to try things and in lower level of service possibly. Are they actually going to?
It's a great question. And it's one that I've heard consistent feedback on, is there is a tension between managing congestion and managing safety, right? And a lot of times they're inversely related. So it can be challenging to understand, or it can appear to be challenging to understand what is the goal, right? I think that one of the big things that we've been talking about with the city of Durham, and look forward to sharing updates with you all hopefully at a future meeting, is now that the high injury network has been released, how do we identify a pilot project or several pilot projects to work through the process? How do we create a shared vision? I think that's one of the things that we've heard several times recently is we know at times we have conflicting priorities. So how do we create the shared vision for that facility? Safety is one of our priorities. And how do we make sure that we're coming to the table on those instances as well? So I think that understanding the process of safety projects, one of the challenges is that our spot safety, for instance, which is one of our biggest safety pots, it's only 18 million across the state. So that is a challenge when our STIP project or STIP program, which is our big source of money, largely prioritizes congestion in the data analysis that it does. So that is one of the challenges that we have, is that safety is important, but how do you fund safety is a big question that we need to work through together. But certainly understanding that process and how do we, when we have funding available, how do we deliver those projects quickly and efficiently as well? Yes, sir.
Follow-up question. So are the priorities and funding levels you mentioned, those are set legislatively?
It's a good question. All right. So I worked in SPOT for like a year. So that's an interesting question. So STIP, part of STIP is in legislation. So it's probably about 3 pages. It's actually a really interesting read if you ever get the chance and you're trying to understand things like how do you fund standalone bike and ped projects, because that is actually in there. So it's about a 3-page piece of legislation, and it dictates to the department different criteria that have to be evaluated, but it doesn't necessarily dictate some of the specifics of how, for instance, congestion, I think, is one of the legislatively required criteria. So it doesn't talk about like what data source you're using or the weights necessarily. All of that is determined through a work group process. So every 2 years we have a SPOT work group, and that SPOT work group is made up of members of the department and the members of municipal planning organizations, rural planning organizations, advocacy groups, and other sorts of members of the public. And together they review methodology from the last 2 year, from the 2 year ago cycle. And they determine what are the data sources, what are the weights, and what are the different other criteria to evaluate all the projects, not just highways, but also aviation, ferry, bike ped transit. So it's about a 6 to 9 month process of reviewing methodology and coming up with new data sources, making tweaks to the process, and figuring out how are you going to score the projects for the next 2 years. Carl, I saw you grab that mic.
Yeah. Could you also just explain the STI law? Because you mentioned earlier that STI or the STIP doesn't fund independent bike pedestrian. So can you explain the STI law?
We'll follow up with the legislation, but there are different things that are restricted or capped in that. So for instance, I was in aviation, so investments in aviation, for instance, were capped at 18.5 million per year at our general aviation airports. So that's something, it's a line item in the legislation. There's caps on funding on specific routes. There's a statement in there about standalone bike ped projects as well. So encourage you all when if you were trying to understand the funding, that document and that piece of legislation is really the core of how we fund transportation. So it's a dense read, but it is a well worth it read to understand how the department selects projects, and also to understand what is the process of evaluating projects and what is that work group. That is all listed in legislation as well.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think 90 to 94% of those dollars are required to be funded on highways, correct?
90%, correct.
90%.
Yep. Wendy.
Wendy, you're going to be our last question.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being here. I believe you just got back from a trip yesterday. Is that Peru?
Yep.
So Becca agreed to come, jet lag or not. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, I think I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation, because I think it really raised kind of a lot of the issues that we are going to need to address, which are things like, what do we actually measure? What do we actually value? What is the process for how things get funded and built? And Carl and I are both, as Becca knows, on the TPO. And so we, in the TPO, the Triangle West Transportation Planning Organization, we are really trying to do that. We're trying to change what we measure. We're trying to measure mobility and not things like vehicle miles traveled. We're trying to measure, be more people-centered and multimodal, and coming up with new ways of valuing and measuring things. And we're going to obviously have to do that alongside NCDOT. So I think it will be great to have your partnership in that, because I think that is the root of the problem there, as well as the funding formula for the state. And for instance, doing a TIA, well, the TIA, it's all focused on cars. So how do we incorporate, when we do the traffic, we can, instead of a mobility impact analysis, right? How can we be, when we're looking at a development, looking at bike, pedestrian, access to transit, as well as cars? So I think it would be really exciting to think about I think the policies and the process is going to be key, and the measurements. So I look forward to all of us working together. And I hope that we could start working start working now on the county and NCDOT applying for the Vision Zero grant funding, because next year is the last year that money will be available. And that would be an opportunity for us to focus on schools, how we can create access to, pedestrian safe access to schools on NCDOT roads, so in the county.
Love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
If we ever need to come back and do a funding projects one-on-one, would love to do it. Happy to do it. But that, I think to your point, that is really a lot of where all this comes down to, is where does the money come from and how do you fund it? So would be happy to come back and do that, talk about the different, not just STIP, but the other pots of money as well, and how we prioritize those, because that might help support some of the conversations you're having too. Cool.
Great. Thank you for being here, Becca. Feel free to come back anytime. And you're welcome to stick around. But yeah, okay, that's what I figured. So the next item on the agenda is related to the Hope Valley Elementary School Family Responsibility Zone. So back in March, we sent a letter to Principal Miller with the findings of our walk audit. And since then, there's been a lot of communication with various members who would be in charge of getting something done. However, things haven't gotten done yet, so we were encouraged to write a letter, highlighting those efforts that we've made in trying to communicate this issue, as well as adding the report. So I've drafted a letter to Sean Eakin, who's the City of Durham Transportation Director. I included Becca and John Sandor, who is the District 2 engineer, Kristen Brookshire, who's with DPS, City Council members, and Board of County Commissioners. And I sent it out earlier today, so I'm sorry if you haven't had a chance to read it. It is mostly just, hey, we did all of this stuff and it's your turn to work on it, is the gist of the letter. Also, Carl, you mentioned earlier that you had something that you wanted to add on this.
We're asking for just general comments in the letter now, or? Yeah. So I did want to note that on the, and I'm glad that Wendy's, wait, where did Wendy go? So on May 7th, there was a joint city-county committee meeting. We have those every couple of months. That was the first time I think we've actually included the school board in that meeting. So I think certainly Wendy requested assistance from Sean at that meeting. I think the larger point is that we had a joint meeting of the city leaders, county leaders, and the school board. On the agenda was a larger discussion about we're talking about the May 7th joint city county meeting. So there was a larger discussion on the agenda about the family responsibility zones and how we all could work together on that. So I think that's the important larger issue there. I think the other thing to note is that there was really we didn't come to a conclusion there about like next steps. There was no really we just had a discussion, kind of ended there, which I think is part of the challenge here. From my perspective, this doesn't need to go in the letter, but to me, it seems like this is a school board policy. And so ultimately the schools have to lead to make this happen. And I think a lot of folks are willing to come to the table, including the city and other partners. But I think it's critical the school board, school leaders have to lead on this to make it happen.
Did you have something?
No.
So I can give you, if you want I'm happy to share some language just to kind of modify that one description there.
Sure.
But I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Sorry. One, I want to thank you all. I'm the chair of a co-chair of the advocacy committee for the Hope Valley PTA. Been working with Melissa, who's been working with John on this a lot. So we're very thankful for BPAC being involved. I'm not here in that capacity right now, but I did want to note that the other factor here is that there's a principal change happening at Hope Valley Elementary. And so there's effective July 1, Ingrid Whitaker will be the new principal. So there's a change in leadership, which is also affecting some of the communication with school board. But we, the PTA, are planning on advocating for some thoughts around that policy at the upcoming school board meeting. So there is a lot of other sort of flurry of work happening around this in terms of the buses. But a lot of what we're focused on, I think, in these conversations is the intersection, which I do think is ultimately an NCDOT and City of Durham problem, not a school board problem.
You said the Hope Valley PTA? Do you guys have an email we could CC you this with?
Yes, John has been working very closely with
Okay.
Hope Valley PTA so far, but you also have an email.
Would love to leverage angry parents to get things to move faster.
We're leveraged.
I will say the letter that we sent to the principal in March also went to the vice president of the PTA at Hope Valley. Yep. Yeah, Melissa Crum.
The challenge that we had was trying, because the requirement, the point made by both Wendy and Carl was that we had to go through DPS to get that request into Shawnee. And the principal Miller tried pushing that up through DPS Central. I tried pushing it up through DPS Central. and neither one of us got anywhere, okay? Wendy Jacobson then intervened on May 7th directly to Sean. And that was because there just didn't seem to be an openness there to people weren't willing, didn't seem to be willing to take the risk, okay, of pushing that forward. And so in the end, we kind of went around DPS a little bit with the direct intervention. But you're right, the solution's got to come from those two, but it really should have been DPS pushing them. And we just, there's a point where you go, you know, what else can we do to make that happen? And yeah, yeah. So
I will say that since there's been a lull in DPS pushing forward on this, that's part of why we kind of wanted to make the initiative of sending like a formal letter to Sean and people at NCDOT, explaining the situation, because we don't know how long it's going to take for DPS to do it, and it's kind of a critical timing issue right now.
well, and the new school year starts August 26th. Okay. Chances are that sidewalk's gonna be fixed at that point, and the kids are no longer gonna have access to busing. So the solutions we've recommended can be implemented very, very quickly. It doesn't require a lot of infrastructure cost or investment. The long-term ones do, but we don't need that to make the intersection safe. We just need the short-term solutions in place.
Go ahead, Wendy.
One suggestion I have is, now that we've all gotten through our budgets, reaching out directly to the superintendent and asking to meet with Dr. Lewis and having a direct conversation with him. Because I think ultimately the schools need to be requesting the city assistance from NCDOT and the city to address the issue. So the ask does need to really ultimately come from the superintendent or the school board. So, you know, again, this may be a good time when, you know, things are a little, we've gotten through budgets, which were very difficult. I will note that on August 12th, we have a joint, it's our next joint Board of County Commit. I don't know if you said this, Carl. August 12th is our next joint meeting between all three governments, the City Council, County Commissioners, and Durham Public Schools Board of Education. We meet. And that is supposed to be on the agenda, are things that are of intersect all three. So something like this is, you know, how is Durham Public Schools, how are we going to meet the needs as a community of these zones, these walk zones? So, you know, the other thing is that BPAC could, in that letter going to all of us, I'm sorry, but I didn't read it, there could be something requesting to be on the agenda at the August 12th meeting, the joint BOCC BOE City Council meeting, to have the what is the plan to address the family responsibility zone, and refer to Hope Valley as a pilot, kind of the first getting started. This would be a pilot. We, back in September, when Matthew Palmer was in charge of facilities, he has since left and there's a new person. He actually, in September, at the first joint meeting, asked that the city and the county and Durham Public Schools form a infrastructure group to work on all types of things, a working group with staff. And unfortunately, that has not happened yet, because we've also had changes in all types of leadership. So I think that long-term would also be a solution, that there needs to be a staff working group of leadership from all three to deal with all kinds of infrastructure issues like this. So I just wanted to suggest that other opportunity of the August 12th meeting.
Okay, so before I receive any other comments, things to add would be clarifying the language for May 7th, that it also included the Board of Education. Also including a request to have this discussed August 12th at the next meeting. Hearing that, I would also think of adding a request to not open that portion of the family responsibility zone until a solution is found. Because this is hundreds of little children crossing a street. They don't have any business crossing right now. And I don't think it's worth waiting for NCDOT or the city or DPS to figure it out and allow them to cross willy-nilly. Like, there needs to be a solution first. So I'm adding that language, unless there's anybody thinking that we shouldn't add that. Okay, any other questions or comments? Do you know?
Involved. We're meeting with her on next week to get her up to speed on some of these conversations. And then I think we could connect. The PTA could be a inroad there.
Okay, great. Does anybody else have anything specific to the letter? Because I would like to vote on whether or not we send it with the things that we previously mentioned of adding.
I'll let people, I'll let you, I have a comment, but after you get some feedback on the letter.
Great. Okay. Can I get a motion to send the letter with adding the language about correcting the language about the joint work session, adding language about pausing that section of the FRZ until a solution is found, and bringing it up at the August 12th meeting?
So motioned.
It was moved by Nathan and seconded by Tony. All those in favor? Those opposed? Great. And then Carl, you can go ahead.
Yeah, my only comment, and this is really for Wendy in our meeting of the Joint City County Committee. I mean, I think initially what BPAC had offered to the school and the community was like, hey, this is a pilot, right? Let's see if we can do it at Hope Valley and then use that as a model for other schools. I think there's a question for us in the August meeting, like, okay, this was offered to us. It's gone nowhere so far. And what does that mean about our ability to work with the schools to make this happen? So I think we have to ask some hard questions of ourselves. So, but thanks to BPAC for like stepping up and offering it. It's an incredible offer. We just got to figure out a way we can deliver that better among our three boards.
I also think it's important to refer to it as a pilot, and the plan would be to do this wherever it's needed, because I did hear somebody make a comment like, well, you know, why Hope Valley, and looking at Hope Valley as like being a privileged, you know, the kids it being an equity issue. And I think that's not understanding that we're talking about kids who are children of color, who are walking from apartments. But, you know, it's funny, but a lot of times people can make assumptions about school populations and things like that. But I did pick up on that. So that's why I think it may be also good to, again, emphasize you're not trying to just advocate for this one school, like, and also that this is children who are living in an apartment, who are children of color, blah, blah, blah. And that, you know, again, this is something we want to do for everybody. So I just wanted to give a little context to that.
Okay, thank you for that. The next item on our agenda is the AI note taker and potentially allocating some of our budget to having one. So right now, I don't know if you noticed, but we have an AI note taker for this meeting. It is a trial called Fireflies. This is apparently what other organizations use, and they've liked it. So our thoughts were, if this works well for this meeting, that we would like to allocate funds from our budget to having this at all of our next meetings. It's a monthly subscription of, I think, was it $10 a month? Yeah, so about $120 a year from our budget going to an AI note taker. And this is so that we can have more detailed and timely minutes for our meetings, as well as allowing our secretary to participate in the meetings and not feel like he has to be taking notes the entire time. So yeah, Chris is our secretary. So this is a voting question related to the budget, that if the results of this specific note taker work, and we like them, are we comfortable allocating $120 a year towards this AI note taker? And if not this one, another one that we might trial in the future? Go ahead.
Quick question. So would that mean that we would have Zoom at every meetings to be able to take the notes?
If we want to, but we don't have to. This would be mostly for the monthly meetings that we have to have the minutes for.
I just meant like if we're at the can opener or somewhere in the public,
Yes.
we then also still have like a Zoom meeting so that the Firefly would work.
No, because you're able to do an audio recording, so like on your phone, and then upload that to it. So it doesn't have to just be, where it's Zoom. And yeah, Rosie, I saw you were gonna say something.
Yeah, so it would be $120 of, I think someone had said, of the $1,000 yearly? Is that what our?
Yeah, the budget starts over July 1st, so we'll have $1,000 of grant funds that's given from the city side for the commission. And yeah, it'll be like 120 approximately. Obviously, there's like tax and fees and stuff, but yeah, so we'll have a fresh $1,000 July 1st.
So I was curious, I'll pass it over to you, Ed, after I'm done. Sorry, I stole the mic. On 2 points. One is we're kind of doing this as a trial. I actually just set this up at Hannah's recommendation just before this meeting. And so I think we don't necessarily know whether this one works for us. So I don't know if we're just kind of voting on it in general as a concept or like the specific solution. That's kind of point number one. Point number two is it's not that much money, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, I was trying to look through the pricing for this and the terms of service and all that kind of stuff. And even if we're the ones paying for it, is this something that we could maybe make under somebody's city account possibly somehow, and then share it with other committees or commissions and make better use of city funds by kind of spreading this more broadly, especially like I think you were telling me NCDOT or maybe some other group was using Fireflies, I think.
Yeah, I think that would be really complicated to share it because it's just like one user basically for it. So, I mean, we can look into that, but typically their pricing is like it's this set amount if it's one user, or it increases if it's like, 10 people, 5 people, 100, and NCDOT has like a large contract with it. So, yeah, but we do want to see how it works today. So it's not, this is the only one that we would go with. This is just one that has been reliable and like DOT uses and some other groups. So.
My question was essentially the same. I would have thought that that might have been something that would have come out of, like the microphones that we're using. It's just shared expense amongst all the other commissions and boards and stuff. You just addressed that.
Yeah, no, not right now. I think AI and just all of technology is moving faster than the city and, everything. So, yeah, to my knowledge, we would be kind of the first. Unless I don't know if DOST is doing anything, but yeah.
Yeah.
Say it's worth I'm happy to have a conversation with the city clerk who manages a lot of the boards and commissions and just, you're right, the technology is evolving, but whether at some point the clerk might consider, buying some package for all the boards and commissions. I mean, it seems like $10 a month is probably worth Chris's time, to sort of save you a little, your time's probably worth more than $10. Yeah. So I think so I'm happy to talk to the clerk to see if there's, a willingness to consider something long-term that might help all boards and commissions that probably have the same challenge in keeping their minutes.
I would also just say the transcript function in AI Companion is actually pretty good. So that's another thing we could test. And it's
Mhm.
already built into Zoom.
I wanted to ask, I know we're testing this specific tool and might look into a different AI tool. Is this the average price for them, like 120 a year, or are there more expensive ones or cheaper ones? I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows.
There's
Okay.
definitely more expensive.
Okay.
If anyone's interested about this too, feel free to take this on as a project, do some research. If y'all have tested any, yeah, I think this is definitely an open conversation. And I think it is a good idea to maybe, yes, see with the city clerks and, because I know every board and commission has a really hard time getting minutes done well. So
Could we, since we're testing it today, could we test this one today, test the built-in Zoom AI companion in August, and then actually judge this in September and just table this for now?
I was going to suggest the same thing. If we're testing, why would we vote on this today?
Well, I guess the main thing that we were going to vote on is whether or not we should allocate funding from the budget towards an AI service. So we can decide to not vote on that today or vote to not do that yet. I think one of the things that Hannah mentioned that I don't think we can get from the AI companion is the ability to upload voice recordings. So whenever we have meetings outside of City Hall or outside our online setting, it's going to be harder for us to get those transcriptions without having that alternative service or without, signing into Zoom. But that doesn't mean we have to decide today that we want to commit this funding from the budget or anything.
yeah, it would be good to maybe figure it out before the September meeting though, because the next, which we're going to be talking about that kind of the next line, but the August meeting is at City Hall, so that'll be easy again to do on Zoom. But the September one, if we're doing it at a different location, that's when it comes to, okay, are we doing Zoom? Are we even recording anything? Because I know it was a little difficult at the can opener. You had to record it on your phone and then you had to listen to it. So yeah.
I actually have a real voice recorder thing that I used. So we have that to use. I did run into a funny issue with it where I got it downloaded onto my laptop, and we talked about possibly uploading it if we wanted to do that. Obviously, we could use it and feed it into something like Fireflies or whatever else. I think that's where it gets challenging, right? Is that with Zoom's transcription won't help us unless we have somebody show up with Zoom, and it's got good enough ability to hear everybody. Whereas the audio recording is a little bit more generic. I will have that at the next meeting. I did run into a bug though with it where it deleted the file when I tried to disconnect it from my computer. It screwed up the storage. Luckily, I had already pulled it onto my computer. But my plan is to keep that and make that available. So if we need that, I will always be planning on having that for whatever solution we need. So if we need to be able to upload audio files or feed it into something to do transcription. I will have that.
All right, so I'm taking that we are not gonna do this today. Just make this decision today. Okay, that's fine. So we'll move on to the next item, which is the meeting location. The next meeting, we're not meeting in July, so just a reminder, don't show up in July. We are meeting in person here at City Hall in August. September's location is also going to be in person, but we haven't decided yet. We were looking into doing it at one of the city parks. And Trent's kind of been leading that. Did you? Yeah.
Yes, I also learned that we would be able to potentially rent space at the Durham Armory for free. So we can look into that being a location because I think that would almost be better than like the Forest Hills Clubhouse. So yeah, there's kind of a couple thoughts out there.
Why are we trying to get out of this building? Is it just because this, is it like access? Like, what's the reason we don't want to just always meet in here? I guess.
Well, it's been brought up in previous years that it's not necessarily like an accessibility issue. It's more of a people aren't always comfortable showing up to City Hall. And so we want to meet the public where they are and provide a place that is comfortable for them, which City Hall, they might associate with paying their bills or, you know, really long budget meetings or something. So this would be providing an alternative option for them.
I also think there's some discussion at one point that we should probably keep in mind about having the meeting in, Durham's very large, right? And it's BPAC, we probably have to recognize that folks that live much further north, much further south, much further east, much further west may have a harder time coming here. And so I think there was some discussion about that being a way to, again, meet people where they're at.
Yeah, and that's part of why we were also looking into the parks because it would be a place that is either very inexpensive or free for us to use, whereas some of the other alternatives were like over $100 or something for us to have a meeting there for one night. So we were looking at different parks, ideally ones that are accessible to people by bike, walking, bus, and car, but also have like a shelter and like a bathroom. So some basic needs that people might want for their meeting. But yeah, so we haven't decided on September's location. This is more just an announcement that August will be in City Hall, and we are still looking into September's location. The next item is the 100 helmets that we received. We are trying to figure out different places to distribute the helmets. So the first place we're going to do is the farmer's market this Saturday. If anybody wants to join me, I will be there. We have a tent thing, so you won't be boiling in the sun. You'll just be boiling in the shade. And then some other volunteer opportunities. Hannah, do you want to?
Yeah, first off, shout out to Hannah Salvaggio for tracking down our helmets, which were delivered and then in a little bit of purgatory. So we officially have them, very exciting. The other ones that you see up here, some things the community engagement has been talking about is one, attending the Pride Parade in September, details there TBD. And then Mary Rose brought up the idea of the community events at Wheels Fun Park. We really welcome any other suggestions that folks have. You can add them in to this lovely Google Sheet itself. And then I'll say this maybe later again in the community engagement, but like would love for folks to, as we go throughout the year, participate at one tabling event if possible. It's very low stakes. It's very fun. People are very nice. Worst case scenario, they take the Starburst and they just walk away. They don't want to hear your spiel. So all that to say, welcome any recommendations for the helmets in particular. We're looking to give them to low-income youth. We're not going to like means test anyone, but that's who they're intended for. So particularly events where you think low-income youth might be attending.
Have you?
I did want to give an update on the helmets. So also am a guardian at Litem, so I did connect with that program as well. And part of the pushback was that potentially a lot of the children in that program might not have a bicycle. So then I reached out to the Durham Co-op and asked if they had bicycles potentially that they could give away to children who were in this program. And they said yes. So that's exciting. So if that's cool, I'm going to just kind of coordinate that and make a Google sheet and kind of work with both of those programs. It might not be that many children because what the co-op wants to do is they want to make sure that they also do a safety lesson as part of it. So I think the idea would be sign up to do this safety lesson on a Saturday morning and you can walk away with a free bike and a helmet. So I think that's
Love
cool.
it. Love it.
I think Bike Durham for when they go into schools and teach people about bike stuff, don't they give away helmets and bikes at the end of that too? Have you talked to them?
When we applied, we got a letter of rec from them and we're willing to share. I think they have a good chunk of helmets and they also got their own. I'm looking at Hannah, like she knows for sure. I don't know why.
Yes.
But yes, we are coordinating with them. But also we have 100. It's a lot of little helmets for a lot of little heads. So love to get out in the community.
Yeah, and I think the objective is to get rid of these by the end of the year. Yeah, so it's calendar year. So that's a lot of helmets to try to get rid of in 6 months.
And we have to do reporting with pictures and everything, so we can't just, give them to anyone willy-nilly, so.
Well, I am going to, before we start the committee and liaison reports. Oh, just kidding. Rosie, you go first.
Sorry. Just on the helmet front, I don't know when this would begin. It would be at the beginning of the school year, but I know tons of elementary schools have bike and walk to school day. And if you wanted to coordinate with some elementary school, I'm sure they would be open to getting help.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And I'm pretty sure Bike Durham knows more about those events. And we can probably work together with them on getting them some helmets, if not just the schools directly. So I wanted to ask if anybody could request adding 10 minutes to the meeting. Tony has made a motion that we add 10 minutes to the meeting. Second? Seconded by John. All those in favor? All those opposed? Great, we are adding 10 minutes to the meeting. Okay, so this is going to be kind of the process moving forward with all of our meetings, is that if you have a liaison or committee report, to write it up and send it directly to the secretary, who is Chris, prior to the meeting. If you didn't do that tonight, that's okay. I'll let it slide. But that's just so it's easier for him to do his minutes. But then also we can spend less time talking during this small window. So I'm limiting everybody to 3 minutes before we move on to the next liaison or committee leader. So starting with Wendy Jacobs, do you have anything to add? Nothing from Wendy. Great. Carl.
Try to be real quick. So as y'all probably heard last night, we passed a historic budget at the city council, $772 million. First of all, just say big thank you to the residents of this community that are willing to sort of invest more in all the things we want in Durham. Heart Team, fare free buses and everything. So thank you all for being part of that. So exciting. So we did continue fare free buses. I want to come back to that in a second. I also want to just list a couple of the highlights so you all know it's exciting stuff. Part of what we did with the budget is, there's a annual budget and then there's a capital budget, the so-called CIP. And because we passed the $200 million in bonds last fall, right, which included $115 million for streets and sidewalks, that absorbed a lot of the projects. And now there's more room in the CIP to do additional stuff year to year. So this budget includes now in total $25 million for street repaving, up from $15 million last year, $10 million for sidewalk repairs, up from $2 million last year. An additional $1.2 million for the Roxborough Mangum conversion work or the design work, $1.5 million for traffic signals, $1.3 million for safer school zones and trail crossings, almost $1 million for pedestrian signal upgrades, almost 400,000 for neighborhood bike routes, and some other projects. So a lot of good stuff in the budget I think we all can be proud of. So I'm excited about that. Just a couple things I want to mention real quick. So one is that on this issue of fare-free buses, I just want to make sure everybody understands that right now, we had a lot of discussion about this at the city council level. So right now, fare-free makes so much sense, right? Although it's not, we have money this year in the budget, one-time money to make it happen. Next year, to make it happen still would mean some kind of tax increase unless there's another source of revenue. So long-term, we got to figure out how to pay for that because we don't need more federal, sort of like stimulus dollars. But the long-term plan is that right now, about 70% of folks who ride buses are low income. And so adding fare boxes, taking time and all to collect revenues, there's just not a lot of revenue there because most folks are low income. Long-term, though, we want to see all of us riding the buses. And at some point, if we're all riding the buses and have potentially cash, we want to start fares again long-term if more folks of different income levels are riding buses. But for right now, with mostly a low-income clientele, it doesn't make sense to collect fares. Just give you a sense of where we're thinking long-term. The other thing I just want to do want to say, and this relates to the conversation. I'm sorry that Becca's not here, but we did talk about this at the TPO meeting today with Wendy. So, and this is all about these long-term plans and like how these things get potentially like all mixed up. So today we were talking about the long-term MTP, which the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is out to 2055. And we're looking at these different scenarios for like growth and population and jobs. And so in the scenario we're looking at today, the preferred scenario that was being modeled by the staff, right, Wendy? It showed like Duke Gregson was no longer converted to like two-way. And so we were looking at a potential where like the plan for our Metropolitan Planning Organization region is saying no two-way conversion. And we're saying in Durham, like two-way conversion and investing in it. So that's the kind of thing we're going to have to watch like a hawk, day by day, week by week, month by month to make sure the two-way conversion actually happens. So I just want to mention that we got the budget, we're doing the design work, but we'll have to keep on that. And I really appreciate you all and Bike Durham for being total advocates for that work. So thank you. And we'll just have to stick on it. Chris, we'll keep working with you on that one. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Carl. Next is our Duke liaison.
There's nothing to report at Duke. They have millions of dollars that they have to find, so there's been no transportation work of any kind.
Royal was our NCCU Fayetteville liaison, so nothing from him. I don't have anything Vision Zero related. UDO task force.
We had our first meeting. Can you hear? The first meeting didn't go very well because we got caught up into a discussion about whether the item we were talking about was appropriate for a UDO type of event. And so it was decided we needed to meet with planning. And I had the opportunity the following week to attend a Q&A UDO session put on by 3 of the planners at East Regional Library. And I was the only person there. So I had their full attention for 45 minutes and took advantage of it and presented 4 ideas. And they were supportive of all of them in different levels, different thoughts for each one of them. And so we have our second meeting is next Monday. We will talk through those and see if there are any other ideas that have come up. But I think 2 of them I think are going to be pretty easy wins. Okay. 2 of them are a little more complicated, but I feel good about the possibility of going forward and making something out of this.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our DOST liaison.
No notes.
Great. And then our committee reports, starting with community engagement.
Awesome. So you heard the helmet situation, excited about that. Also, just final plug for we are tabling at the farmers market this week. Sign up by end of day tomorrow so we can figure out how to stagger times, but welcome folks to come there. We will have a easy up, shout out Maggie. We won't be baking in the sun this month. Other things, Maggie, you are just all on this bulleted list. You are taking lead on creating a design for a trail etiquette sign that we're working to partner with Parks and Rec to put along the ETT, and then leading the design of an additional poster that we can put up at tabling that shows a pedestrian and bike map. We also filmed the Safe Routes to School video this past weekend. Mary Rose, Nathan, Christian, myself, a unsolicited, well,
Ed was
solicited-
there too.
Ed as well, Ed and Kit, and a youth not affiliated with any members of this board showed up, which was very exciting. And some other youth as well. That should be coming hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We're working with Royal on that. And he's still interested despite rolling off the board. So looking forward to coordinating with him. And I think that's it in the community engagement world.
Great, thank you. Development review.
Yep. So development review met last Thursday and we had 5 plans to review. 2 of them were new. One actually a Top Golf property in RTP and another one on Carpenter Fletcher Road. Those were the 2 first revisions and the other 3 were second or third pass. But we also had Leslie Tracy from the City Department of Transportation to talk about multi-use path along Guest Road, which would connect the Ellerby Creek Trail all the way up to Guess and Broad, and there are a couple different projects there. Brian Taylor was helping us kind of navigate how those overlap. And so nothing has really been designed yet, but the message is that there is a initiative for multi-use path on Guess Road, which is in a crash zone. There are 2 really hot spots there, intersection of Guess and Broad, and then the trail crossing there, I guess, with the mid-block crossing. So that's it.
For planning and policy, we mostly talked about a different part of the UDO that was the draft zones and the allowed uses of those zones. And the reason why that is in scope is because walkability and bikeability ultimately come down to land use. And the current drafts of both of those basically freeze all of the city and molasses in terms of like what's allowed to be built and limit infill to a few very specific locations and just make it so that we're going to continue to sprawl and not infill and densify like we need to. So that was my big takeaway from the meeting. We will be meeting in July, and that's it.
Oh yeah, and I guess a quick question for the committees. Are either of you meeting in July?
No.
It depends on how many cases come in. So
Okay.
right now, I think we do need to.
Okay, so plan on DevRev and PMP meeting in July. Okay, great. We might not have needed that extra 10 minutes I asked for. Yeah. Okay, so we don't have any announcements or updates. However, but Dale, go ahead.
Carl didn't mention in the budget, but it also, the city council kept the half cent for park and trail maintenance at a half penny. There had been discussion about making it revenue neutral, so it would have become like 0.3 cents. And so that will generate over $1 million. That will provide, I think, 6 positions for maintenance and about $400,000 additional dollars for park and trail maintenance. So that's also good.
I didn't really know where to talk about this, so hopefully it's the right place. One thing that I think is kind of interesting for BPAC members to be aware of is the Durham Police announced a civilian traffic investigations group. It's something that's allowed under state law. Essentially, it'll be a group of people who are civilians. They'll be a uniform, but they're not police. They're not armed. They go to respond to traffic accidents or traffic collisions, and specifically ones that don't involve any kind of significant criminal actions. So think fender benders or small little things like that. But I think in terms of BPAC, we may be very interested in that simply because that may be a better way to get data. If you think back to the Vision Zero presentation, there was talk about like, do we have information about road conditions? Were there curb bump outs? Was there a painted crosswalk? Stuff like that. There's also, I think, some interesting gaps that people who are specialized in doing that could cover where I've personally witnessed issues where police were not aware that an unmarked crosswalk is still a crosswalk and a pedestrian still has right of way. And they have a lot on their plate, so maybe they don't get enough training or exposure to those kinds of things. But my hope would be that if we kind of pay attention to that and push for some policies with that group, maybe they will be better at things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there for people to be aware of, maybe be on our radar.
Any other announcements or updates? Yeah. We have not sent the letter to the sheriff. The edits were finished this afternoon, so I will be sending that tomorrow. Yes. Sorry that that's been taking a long time. Yes, Wendy?
I forgot something I should share. We approved at our last meeting, last Monday, the contract for a BRT study, that over $800,000 BRT study. Very exciting. If you want to, has a really detailed scope of work. Very, very detailed, really good. And we are hiring a new person in Durham County Transportation who is just going to be overseeing all of the next steps related to BRT. So
Bus rapid
Bus rapid
transit.
Is that it? Wendy, I should know, that's a shared city county thing maybe? Because I think there's 3 new positions at the city that are doing BRT planning, right?
so it's separate. You guys have moved forward with studying moving forward with one line, right, the Holloway. And so we are funding the county, those positions and supporting that. But this study, which is over $800,000, is going to study every possible BRT route in Durham. So comprehensive, and will incorporate the work that you all are doing on that one route. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, collaboration. Okay, great. Okay, so summary of communication priorities. I will be sending that letter to the sheriff, as well as updating the letter regarding Hope Valley Elementary and sending that to the respective Google. Are there any other ones specifically? Yes, Ed. Sorry.
Just harking back to our guest from Durham Can, I think long-term reaching out to that organization and inviting them to present once they've gotten to a point with their research where it makes sense to kind of share it. And then more short-term, as Hannah and I just briefly discussed, maybe inviting them to a community engagement committee meeting.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think I have some unread emails regarding Durham Can in my inbox. So I can follow up with that, as well as maybe we can coordinate something with community engagement. All right. Great. That's it. Thank you all. We are ending right on time.